21. He had to behave differently today. That was Brigadier General Nakamoto's order. The international prestige of the Empire of the Rising Sun was at stake, the general had warned sternly. Tajima knew very little about this college other than that it was an all-women's college. Would all the young women still be there? That would not be possible, he thought, with the war, the mopping up campaigns, and everything else going on. But he was hoping that not all had fled in advance of the victorious Japanese army. After all, this college was now the refugee center for women and children. That would make his side assignment from Nakamoto a bit easier. Half an hour's march brought Tajima and his troops right outside the front gate of the college. The machine gun platoon began to position themselves right away. A machine gun was mounted at the main entrance and the others atop the walls and the side gates. Guard, a middle-aged Chinese, rushed up to Second Lieutenant Kuruda, who was at the head of Tajima's procession. "Sir, this is a safety zone," the guard explained. Kuruda slapped him hard across the face. Tajima was pleased. Kuruda had not hesitated at all. "To hell with your safety zone. We're here to search for soldiers." Kuruda pushed the guard aside. Tajima and his troops, over 100 of them, marched in through the gate. He surveyed the scene. The buildings were quite impressive with their upturned eaves and grand columns, not unlike many buildings he had seen back in Kyoto, Osaka, or Tokyo. He had to be on his best behavior today. After all, this college was run by Americans, and he didn't want to disgrace the empire. A tall, middle-aged American woman, along with a group of Chinese, all respectfully dressed, was walking toward him. She had to be that American woman he had been briefed about earlier. She was almost a full head taller than him. He bowed. "How do you do, madam?" he said, extending his hand to the American woman when the two groups met in the middle of the road. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tajima of the Imperial Japanese Army." Lieutenant Fuji, who had gone to missionary schools back in Japan, acted as interpreter. "How do you do, sir?" the American woman replied, shaking his hand. "I'm Professor Vautrin, acting dean of Jingling College for Women. What can I do for you?" "We're searching for Chinese troops who could be hiding in the buildings here," Tajima explained. "This is a refugee center for women and children," explained Professor Vautrin. "I can assure you that there are no soldiers here." She was looking right into his face when she spoke, and looking down at him as well. Tajima had never encountered this before, and felt compelled to puff off his chest a bit more than usual. There was only the slightest awkward pause, but then Tajima composed himself as the American woman was waiting for a response. "I don't distrust what you have said at all, madam," he said. "However, I'm still obligated to check with our own eyes and report back to my superiors." "Sir, with all due respect, your troops have been coming at least 10 or 20 times a day for the last 2 days." "Oh?" He feigned ignorance. "They must have been from other units. My orders are to ensure." "If you insist, sir," the American woman merely shrugged. Tajima walked alongside the American woman when the inspection tour began. They were followed by several dozen of junior officers and soldiers and a few of the college's staff members. Tajima noticed that Zampa, Nakamoto's orderly, was right behind him. As they walked across the quad, Tajima noticed that almost every tree branch was bending with the weight of a women's and children's clothes hung out to dry. They pushed open a heavy wooden door in the science hall and stepped into a large room. The sense of space was immense, and the weight of the air in the room seemed to bring a sense of silence to all who entered. Their footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor, but for Tajima it was an eerie feeling, At the far end of the hall, on an altar, was a statue of Jesus on the cross. Tajima had seen that image before. In the front of the room, close to the altar, were a group of women, some middle-aged, some quite young, all sitting in a circle on the floor. Each held an open book on her lap. At the sight of the soldiers, they stood up in alarm. But the tall American woman motioned for them to remain calm. "What are they doing here?" Tajima asked. "Reading the Bible and praying," replied the American woman. "Praying? For what?" He was puzzled. "For peace." He turned to look at her. This American woman, had she just mocked him? There was no sarcasm in her eyes. The tensed muscles in his face relaxed. "Yes, for peace," he mumbled. Tajima turned to leave, but a young girl sitting close to the altar caught his eye. There was something about her which set her apart from everyone else. She looked to be about 13 or 14. Tajima could see that she was beautiful, of course, but she seemed so absorbed in her reading that it was as if he did not even exist. He felt piqued. "What's that you're reading?" He walked closer to her and asked. The girl looked up as if just being awakened from her reverie. "You mean me?" Her eyes were large and liquid, perfect, pure. "I'm trying to understand something," the girl murmured, pointing at a page in the book she was reading. "Here Jesus says, 'I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven.'" Fuji tried to translate the passage for him, but Tajima merely furrowed his eyebrows in confusion and shook his head. "That's what I want to understand," the girl murmured, a puzzled look in her large eyes. She turned to look at the tall American woman. "Loving your enemies? Praying for them? That must be very hard." The American woman smiled warmly and said, "It is very hard, but a true Christian should do exactly that. Jesus makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the righteous and on the—" Fuji was about to interpret again, but Tajima waved him off. Instead, he gave Zamba a meaningful look. Zamba nodded. This girl would be perfect for Nakamoto. After another half an hour, their inspection had concluded. They had found no Chinese soldiers. Tajima gladly signed his name to a document provided to him by the American woman, in essence declaring that the college had been searched. That would be the end of it. As he shook hands with the American woman one last time before turning to leave, Tajima puffed out his chest once again and proceeded to lead his troops out of the campus.